Is that better? Is that better? Can everyone hear me now? Can everyone hear me now? Did I just talk the entire time muted? I think I did that once before. Hopefully it's working here. Can everyone hear me now? If I could get a confirmation here, that would be absolutely great. Like I said, a little bit of no audio again, no sound. What is going on here? Hold on. Is that better? Is that better? Can everyone hear me now? Can everyone hear me now? Did I just talk the entire time muted? I think I did that once before. Hopefully it's working here. Can everyone hear me now? If I could get a confirmation here, that would be absolutely. What in the world? All right, sorry, a little bit of technical difficulties here. It's been a little bit of a while here since I've done all this. So, okay now, okay, yeah, definitely. Man, this is definitely a little bit of a Mickey Mouse organization that I'm working with right here. The whole like I said, showing my rust here to use a football analogy for sure. Quarterback hasn't played in a couple of years, maybe in Cleveland, for example. Definitely feeling every single one of those days of that rust. Maybe not the most best example. Let's move on here. But anyway, I apologize for that, for the technical difficulties at the top of this stream. But yes, like I was saying, it's great to be back. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday. It's been quite a while since I've talked about Season 2 of Breaking Bad. I apologize that it's been so long. Life has, life kind of got in the way, if you will. Unfortunately, I'm the farthest thing from a full-time YouTuber, if you will. I know there's a lot of great Better Call Saul channels out there still pumping out content all the time. You definitely know who I'm talking about. People posting, for example, 3-hour epic-long videos on the story of Mike Ehrmantraut. So yeah, there's some great content out there for sure. But that's neither here nor there. I'm right here in the moment right now, ready to talk about this wonderful episode. And yes, right off the top. At Paul Sura, thank you so much. You said that you forgot that you had a hockey game tonight, but I'll check it out later. Have a great stream. I really appreciate it. At Paul Sura, if I do remember correctly, you said that you were the public address announcer for the Arizona Coyotes. So I apologize for scheduling the stream at the same time that the team has a game. And thank you again so much for the super chat. Have a great stream, Anton, and everyone here. Enjoy, and remember to click that thumbs up. It helps Anton in the channel. You know what? Thank you so much, Paul Sura. Like I said, you've done a better job promoting my channel than I have. And I will absolutely say yes, and to echo the illustrious words of, is that the right word? To echo the very, I don't know, supportive words of Paul Sura. I would appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. It definitely helps the channel from what I've heard in respect to engagements and promoting the stream and things like that. But yeah, so like I said, I'm ready to talk about this episode for sure. How's it going at Charlie Hennings? I've been wondering when this was coming. Yes, like I said, I hope it hasn't been too long of a hiatus since the last one, but ready to rock and roll here at Beth Montgomery. Wow, thank you, Anton. Been missing the content. Really appreciate it for sure at Beth. Apologize for that audio issue at the very beginning. What is up at Jason O? At Dread Electric, what is up as well? At Justin Cruz, what up, Anton? Sorry I'm late, I'm just done with dinner. Had hot dogs and fries for dinner. Yep, solid combo right there. Can't go wrong there at Justin Cruz. At Nigel Barthmore, what is up? Hine, yes, and Anton, I am choosing you over my other group going live. Oh wow, I really appreciate that for sure. At Hine, like I said, only so many hours in the day, and the fact that you are watching the channel and watching the stream for even a little bit, I really, really do appreciate it. So I guess with that sort of out of the way, and hopefully with the audio issues being corrected, really excited to jump into this one through and through. I got a chance to rewatch this, and again, I know I feel like a broken record here, and I feel like I'm sort of repeating cliches when I say these, but my God, what a great episode. And again, I think it's pretty obvious that I like this episode, and it's pretty obvious that I love this show so much, and rewatching this episode for the 20th time sort of reminded me of that fact for sure, in respect to the fact that, I never get tired of watching this show. And to tell you the truth, the craziest thing, I actually even noticed and learned things for the first time on this 20th watch of this show, of this episode specifically, that I had not actually noticed the first couple of times when I've watched this episode. So at Beth Montgomery, have you seen other Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul streams? Have seen other Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul streams. You're the best. I really appreciate that at Beth Montgomery. I really do. I appreciate that the kind words for sure. And hopefully I can maintain that superlative that you've just given me in the chat. So yeah, without further delay, let's jump right into this one. And again, I said without further delay, and I'm going to sort of restate another caveat here. But again, I don't want to get bogged down too much in the sort of just repeating the specific details of what happens in every single one of these scenes, excuse me. Again, I want to definitely kind of speak more broadly and more thematically when sort of going over this episode right here, and I'm really looking forward to it for sure. So now, without further delay, of course, as we all know, this episode here down is the second iteration of this cold opening black and white flash forward scene of the pink teddy bear that we first saw in the very first episode of season 2 of Breaking Bad, entitled 737. And again, the pretty much the same shot here where we see this pink teddy bear. Again, a slight variation to it. If we remember back to the very first episode, the season 2 premiere, we only really got the shot of the pink teddy bear, and the scene then cuts to black, and we see the intro credit scene roll. And again, I don't want to get bogged down too much in all of the sort of color and symbolism that this scene represents, at least in my humble opinion. If you do want to hear me talk about that, I went into that in rather great detail in the review of the very first episode of season 2 of Breaking Bad, entitled 737. So definitely go back and check that out if you want to sort of hear me discuss all of that. But it's actually quite interesting. I remember for the longest time I was always very perplexed about this sort of story that was written here over the course of season 2 of Breaking Bad, where we kind of see the sort of premise of these black and white flash forward scenes, in my opinion, is sort of to display the sort of broad reaching unintended consequences of the actions of Walt and Jesse, which of course is finally revealed to us when we get the final payoff of the scene during the season 2 finale. But it's actually kind of interesting. I was sort of doing a little bit of research here in respect to the sort of, I guess, the developments and the writing of this scene. And I actually didn't know this until I sort of found this article in the AV Club that I sort of, snipped right here. But in respect to talking about season 2 of Breaking Bad, of course, the question was the question was in this interview with the AV Club, where the interviewer asked Vince Gilligan specifically, you talked about how in season 2 you had a firm plan, and in season 3 you improvised a little more. When you went into Box Cutter, how much did you know about where season 4 was going? Again, it was in the context of season 4, but just hearing what Vince Gilligan said here about season 2 of Breaking Bad, it's actually really interesting when he says, we knew a little less than we knew in season 2. Season 2 was the only season where we knew exactly where we would end at the beginning of it all. So again, that's pretty interesting here, where again, for the longest time I thought they sort of just had to sort of write their way out of this sort of very, I guess, ambiguous scene here, where you sort of think that the sort of broad-reaching implications of all of these things that they're showing you are going to more directly impact Walter White as opposed to indirectly impact Walter White, as the scene ended up doing. And of course, with the fact that when we see this scene at the very beginning of the season 2 premiere, we see this charred out teddy bear inside of Walter White's pool, and we're sort of very confused as to what's going on here. This is, of course, during our very first watch of Breaking Bad, and of course, with the benefit of hindsight, we now know. But now that we've sort of seen the continuation of the scene here, where we see this man in a sort of hazmat suit pulling the pink teddy bear out of Walter White's pool. Again, this in and of itself is sort of very perplexing, and we're wondering how this is going to directly affect Walter White. But of course, what's actually quite interesting here is that the final money payoff shot in this scene before it cuts to black and then we see the opening credit scene roll is we see this pair of glasses that is, of course, at the time, definitely intended to seem as though it was implied that these glasses belong to Walter White. It's the exact same style of frame that Walt wears. It's in an evidence bag. It's by the pool. It's by Walter White's house. We're seeing all of this other sort of evidence here in this bag as well. There's a wallet here. All sorts of other paraphernalia. The pink teddy bear, of course. And when I was first watching this season for the very first time, you of course think, what in the world is going on here? What sort of crazy event happened with all of this crime scene evidence? Why in the world is there a man collecting evidence in the back of Walter White's house by his pool? And you think it's going to directly impact Walter White, but of course, at the end of the day, we know what happened in respect to the plane crash that occurred as a result of sort of Jane's father being so distraught, and where he sort of indirectly causes or directly causes two commercial planes to collide into one another. And of course, this is, I guess in hindsight, this is all the debris that fell onto Walter White's house from the airplane. But again, it's kind of interesting where we it was definitely, it seemed as though it was implied to be at the time during episode 4 of season 2 of Breaking Bad that these glasses were meant to be Walter White's glasses. But of course, with the benefit of hindsight a little bit, it kind of comes across as a definite sort of misdirection and red herring, if you will, where the sort of whose glasses these are, and or whether or not these are Walter White's glasses, is never revealed to us over the course of Breaking Bad following us seeing the scene. And of course, if we remember to the finale, really skipping ahead here, to the finale of season 2 of Breaking Bad, where Walter White's sitting in the back of the pool after sort of Skyler leaves him, again, not wanting to get bogged down too much in the details. I'll get to that when we talk about that episode. But of course, he's sitting there, he's wearing his glasses, he looks up, well, he hears the sort of the sound, the collision in the air, he looks up, and eventually the pink teddy bear falls in the pool. But of course, there was never a story revealed to us regarding how in the world Walter White may or may have not lost his glasses. And again, theoretically, I suppose, these could be Walter White's glasses. These could be glasses that sort of fell from the airplane as well, with the benefit of hindsight. At the end of the day, I guess it doesn't really matter. I sort of think back to that great episode of Mythbusters where Vince Gilligan is sort of using artistic license and artistic liberties to sort of explain away all of these sort of alleged plot holes, specifically in regards to the science of sort of the series of Breaking Bad. And yeah, I've always just wondered, I mean, theoretically, I guess this could have just been a big red herring where this was someone else's pair of glasses that happened to be the exact same style and frame that Walter White wears. But of course, in the moment, with the benefit of hindsight, it really comes across as a red herring. And again, if I can find this this other sort of it might be, see if I can find the exact spot here. But yeah, there's another great shot. I hope you can see it. I hope my big head isn't covering it. But again, we can also see this eyeball here, which looks to be the other eyeball from the pink teddy bear that was sort of taken in this evidence bag. That, of course, we then know that in season 3 of Breaking Bad, in the cold open, not the cold open scene, in the sort of the very first act of the season 3 premiere, we see Walter White following him, throwing the money he set on fire in the barbecue into the pool. When he eventually fishes all the money out, he then finds that eyeball in the pool filter. So again, I've always wondered about this, where to me it always seemed as though they were sort of crafting a different ending, and then maybe, again, that they decided to change it, if you will. But if you listen to Vince Gilligan's words directly from this interview, they had decided this the entire time, that this sort of black and white montage scene was eventually leading to this plane crash that was going to be caused indirectly by the actions of Walter White. And again, you wonder sort of, why they would have this. I mean, it's a very quick scene. I mean, I sort of didn't even notice it the first 20 times, but I guess if you sort of go back and rewatch it again and pause it at this very moment, you can see the eyeball inside this evidence bag, and you can sort of, play this game. Well, maybe the eyeball was lost out of the evidence bag. But again, I mean, that seems like pretty much forensics 101, where you wouldn't sort of lose a key piece of evidence like this. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's sort of, I guess, up to the interpretation of the audience, where maybe this is another eyeball from a different teddy bear than the eyeball that ends up in the sort of pool gutter of Walter White's pool, or maybe, I don't know, but you would imagine that maybe they would have looked in there as well in respect to sort of debris that may have ended up in there. So again, I'm really nitpicking here, but it's definitely something that caught my eye when I was rewatching this for, maybe the two dozenth time. So yeah, just, I'm kind of curious to see what other people may or may not think about this sort of eyeball here in this bag, and again, I didn't know this until I read this interview today, where this was the plan the entire time. So learn something new every day. So yeah, what is up at Stone Yoda? At Suburban Catholic, these cold opens were great, especially in retrospect. Yes, I agree completely at Suburban Catholic. But yeah, that's pretty much the could just be a typo at Hine. Yeah, I suppose we could just chalk it all up to that. And again, I've also heard things about, prop master errors potentially, where I guess the showrunners aren't sort of so involved in the process that they're sort of looking at every single thing that's in the evidence bag and sort of thinking about how, wait a minute, this eyeball is going to be a crucial piece of the story in season 3 of Breaking Bad, and it's also going to appear in season 4. It shouldn't be in the evidence bag. That's technically sort of a plot hole. Of course, you could artistically explain it away, as I attempted to do just now. And like I talked about in that very first the season 2 premiere review that I did, we see the eyeball and box cutter when Skyler enters Walt's house under false pretenses, when Walt doesn't return from work, when he's sort of quasi held hostage by Mike and Gus. And that's the last we see of the eyeball. And it's never seen again after that. And there's no real sort of explanation to what happens with that eyeball. So, again, that's we all know sort of what happens here with the cold opening scene, where it eventually goes. But yeah, just a lot of interesting food for thought here, and it's kind of interesting. I was sort of maybe thinking about this, maybe a little bit selfishly, but I'm even thinking about things like the eyeball and stuff like that, and I sort of think about just all the still, I would guess, unexplained, really subtle Easter eggs that could still be explained theoretically if you made additional iterations of this Breaking Bad universe, which again, for whatever reason, doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. Like I said, maybe Vince Gilligan doesn't want to be Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. But again, while Star Wars had some, real, I guess, flops, if you will, in respect to Disney acquiring that franchise, at the same time, they've had a lot of successes as well. So, yeah, I mean, to each their own. Like I said, I've mentioned this again and again. The grand irony in all of this is that they made Slip and Jimmy, despite the fact where it seems as though they want to go out on top, but they also made Slip and Jimmy. Quite the cognitive dissonance, if you will. So, yeah, great opening scene here for sure, and something I've always thought about here in respect to this episode and how it sort of impacts the remainder of the story here in Breaking Bad. But of course, following this great sort of first scene in Act 1 where we see Walt and Jesse meeting at this gas station here to sort of discuss where they go forward following Walter White's alibi more or less working. And again, I don't want to get bogged down in every single little detail here, but it was actually kind of funny when I was rewatching the scene. It did kind of make me, of course, it did kind of make me think about Better Call Saul during the final season where Saul all but said that Walt and Jesse were pretty incompetent and outright said if it wasn't for him, Walter White would have been in prison within a month or dead. And it is kind of funny how I guess Walt needs to talk to Jesse to sort of explain to him where they go from here in respect to the fact that he can't leave his house for more than 20 minutes without his family worrying. And again, it seems a little bit, they're trying to be all covert and coy here, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like, it kind of makes me think back to the season 1 finale of Breaking Bad, where Jesse's sort of saying this is sort of this is what a sort of non-criminal's idea of what criminals should do in order to converse would look like. And you would think they wouldn't have to go like right here to this gas station and meet under these sort of pretenses and talk across the aisle and make it look like they're not actually here. It seems like a lot of elaborate work here for Walter White. And I guess theoretically, I guess he could have went right up to Jesse and talked to him here, but you do wonder. I mean, it is kind of. I have also extrapolated out that Walt probably needed, like, under false pretenses, and again, sort of telling a half truth here, a sort of white lie to Skyler, where he had to go out to get something at the store he actually needed, and at the same time, he uses this as an opportunity to talk to Jesse, and they couldn't talk anywhere else, and maybe he was worried that Skyler would show up as well. I don't really know, but again. I think I'm really nitpicking too much here in respect to sort of trying to psychosemantically analyze the brain of Walter White in this scene. But yeah, great scene here through and through where, of course, also a huge progression of the story where Jesse's like, all right, how do we process following this, or how do we proceed following this? And of course, Walt's saying we need to sort of lay low for a while and we can't trek out to these Indian reservations and cook for days because I put my family through this crazy ordeal. I need to mend fences. If I disappear for more than 20 minutes after what I did to them, it's going to cause a great amount of panic. Jesse, of course, saying, well, while you're fixing fences, what am I going to do? I'm Busto. Your DEA brother-in-law took all of my money. Of course, this is then followed by Walt giving Jesse $600. Of course, him asking where's the rest, definitely implying that because the DEA took my share of our cash, I need half of the cash that you have left. We're 50-50 partners. Walt, of course, not buying into this premise at all, basically, and will outright say to his face, why should I be penalized for your carelessness? Jesse sort of being resigned to the fact here that Walt's not going to give up this money, and of course, a great sort of piece of writing here where Jesse sort of needed to get kicked out of his house because had he not, and yes, he totally just smokes through that $600 and spends it on weed and methamphetamine. But again, he could have sort of laid low and stayed in the house and sort of just bided his time and did nothing. But of course, when he was kicked out of his house because of the circumstances that will take place over the course of this episode, that's when really all of this sort of converges and where the sort of shit really hits the fan here for Walt and Jesse and makes the story progress in the way it does. So yeah, great sort of a piece of foreshadowing for where the scene goes. And again, just a great scene through and through. So much humor interjected in this scene as well that I couldn't in no way replicate by describing it here in this stream. You just got to go back and watch it. But yeah, it's a great sort of open here to this wonderful episode. Justin Cruz, Anton, do you know when Better Call Saul Season 6 will be on Netflix? That's a great question. I'm not actually sure if it will be on Netflix after with the whole AMC Plus and their sort of new streaming service. You wonder if eventually Breaking Bad might not even be on Netflix in the future, if it may be entirely transferred over to AMC Plus. It definitely seems like that's going to happen eventually whenever sort of Netflix, licensing agreement with Breaking Bad ends, I would imagine, at Justin Cruz. So I don't even know if it will be on Netflix, but that's purely conjecture and speculation on my part. So at Beth Montgomery, exactly trying to be cool, but they're amateurs. Yes, I sort of got that vibe here for sure. At Walt had that annoying habit of needing to over-explain stuff of actual literal importance. Yeah, I know what you mean there, Hine. Definitely sort of someone who really wants to, I guess, plan and make sure, and sort of, at least in his mind, go over something again and again and again. Better to sort of measure 10 times and cut once, if you will, to sort of use an idiom. But of course, yeah, following this great scene here, we then see the next morning with Skylar waking up. Her noticing that Walter White is not by her bedside. Of course, I would imagine her brain immediately goes to this sort of panic mode, like is he gone again? Of course, we then learn that Walter White has sort of cooked breakfast here for his family, and we then see this breakfast scene ensue. And of course, I don't want to sort of go over every single little detail here in the scene, but with the benefit of hindsight, and also we can definitely sort of see it in the moment, this scene here just reeks of overcompensation by Walter White. Of course, he's trying to, in his head, mend these fences by acting all, I guess, outgoing and happy, like nothing's wrong. Again, this breakfast seems to be a sort of, I guess, quasi-apology, if you will, for his behavior over the course of, I guess, season 1 and of the sort of ordeal he put his family through with the fugue state. But of course, as we can sort of see by Walter Jr. and Skylar's actions here in this episode, they can sort of see through this facade, if you will. Skylar sort of stating outright, and we can also see Walt Jr. being very affected by this as well, with this being the episode by which he decides to use his pseudonym of Flynn. And of course, following this, we then see Walt really trying to just, quickly and very cleanly just tie a nice bow in this situation. I cooked my family a nice breakfast. I encouraged my wife to sort of go to this creative writing seminar because, as we know from season 1 of Breaking Bad, Skylar is into writing short stories. And of course, him then trying to explain the fact that, you asked me about whether or not I had a second cell phone and you heard a ringing sound, but of course there was no record with the phone company. But of course he explains this by saying it was my cell phone alarm. They sound so similar, etc., etc. But of course, Skylar clearly knows that this is BS. She knows that something is going on here, and she was maybe hoping for Walt to sort of come clean, if you will, maybe just sort of living in the moment there, not wanting to sort of confront Walt in front of Walter Jr. right there in the morning. But when she can just see the sort of manipulative wheels sort of gearing up and turning into Walter White's head, and he progresses with the continuous lies and half-truths and sort of saying whatever he thinks his wife wants to hear in order for him to explain his way out of the situation. We can just see the sort of, just the, I guess, in the moment, just sort of, I don't even really know what adjectives to sort of describe here for Skylar's emotions, just sort of contained, just anger, and sort of, again, sort of the emotional betrayal, if you will, that I feel like Skylar is experiencing here in this scene. And yes, I know some people may sort of feel that Skylar's actions here in this scene were in this episode were somewhat questionable, but again, I know there's some sort of not the biggest Skylar White fans out there, shout out Paul Sura, but again, despite that, I'm still going to sort of, in my best attempt, try to explain sort of the behavior of Skylar White and how I can truly sort of rationalize and sort of understand where Skylar is coming from here. I really do. I don't view her as annoying at all, if you will, and just the sort of way I've seen this story and the sort of way I've sort of thought about the story in my head, I can definitely understand Skylar's actions here in this scene. And of course, mid sort of lie, fabrication, overcompensation by Walter White here. We then see while his head is down, while he's cleaning the dishes, sort of go, not even realizing that he's having a conversation with nobody anymore. Skylar then abruptly gives the Irish goodbye, if you will, and abruptly leaves, drives away, doesn't tell Walt where he's going. Of course, Walt calls out for her. She says nothing to stop. He then calls her cell phone to try to see what's going on, but of course, very intentionally, she left the cell phone there. Of course, a big piece of foreshadowing for where the story will go. And again, I don't want to sort of get bogged down too much here in the very beginning of explaining away Skylar's actions, but over the course, as this sort of storyline will progress over the course of this episode, I will. But yeah, it's really interesting to see where when Walt, it's sort of out of the fire into the frying pan for Walt and Jesse. That's sort of the real sort of premise I see here of these two characters here, where they're always in some sort of trouble. And again, at the very beginning of this episode of the season, they were in that sort of, they had this problem with Tuco Salamanca. Then the sort of immediate violent threat was dealt with, and then of course, while that sort of issue was corrected, they then had to sort of then explain away their disappearance and sort of explain an alibi. And then of course, when that situation was finally dealt with, now they have a new problem here where Walt is sort of losing sort of, I don't know if command is the right word, but he's sort of losing the faith of his family here in the scene. And of course, the sort of continuation of when Jesse's mom meets with Hank Schrader. Of course, that's sort of the premise by which she visits Jesse's house and finds his methamphetamine laboratory, to use her own words. And of course, Jesse's problem is that even though Tuco is dead and his alibi was solid, he's now effectively homeless here in this episode. So always, again, as they try to fix one problem, when you think, just when you think this one problem is dealt with, a new problem arises. And it really sort of, makes me think of that great piece of dialogue that Walt says to Saul Goodman, where later down the season, he just says this whole process has been one step forward and two steps back. And yeah, it's definitely, again, the more you rewatch season 2 of Breaking Bad, you definitely get that vibe for sure. So Adhine, thank you so much for the super chat. Thank you so much, Anton. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching this stream and supporting this channel. I really appreciate it, Adhine. Thank you so much. I call it White Family's breakfast as holy relic. Ha. I guess I don't know. I don't know if I'm missing the. I may be missing that reference there entirely, Adhine. If you again, maybe you have to explain that to me further. But when I think of Holy Relic, my mind immediately goes to the film Amadeus. Am I totally off there? I sort of think of the Emperor Joseph saying it's not a holy relic when Mozart kisses his ring. So maybe I'm totally off there, but thank you so much for the super chat, Adhine. I really appreciate it. At Beth Montgomery, credibility, lack of credibility. Yes, I would agree. Lack of credibility, lack of faith. That's all sort of, yeah. He's losing sort of, I feel like command and grasp is sort of a, not the sort of best word to use for, especially in perspective of, it sort of views Walt as sort of the head of his family as opposed to them being more equals. But yeah, it's a lot of food for thought here for sure. Of course, following this, speaking of the sort of problem that Jesse finds himself in, and thank you again, Hime, so much for the super chats. Great scene here where we see Jesse at this sort of nice, prestigious law firm, sort of waiting around. Definitely was told to come here for an unknown reason. Jesse's parents' lawyers tell Jesse, "Are you ready?" And Jesse, of course, says, "For what?" Would be helpful. And of course, when his parents first walk in here in this scene, Jesse, of course, thinks and says out loud, "Oh no, not an intervention." Again, I could totally just extrapolate and just think back to the story and the sort of backstory of Jesse Pinkman, which I think is actually rather important in terms of, if you really want to get a full grasp of his character and his sort of background and upbringing to sort of explain away and maybe even I guess, apologize for his actions, if you will. But I can definitely imagine, just based on Jesse's just actions and mannerisms and language here in the scene of not another intervention, I can imagine that his parents tried and tried to sort of get Jesse to sort of go turn his life around the sort of more traditional route via an intervention. I would imagine this happened quite a few times, and Jesse thinks, oh my goodness, this is another intervention right here. But of course, it's then quickly revealed to us that Jesse is told to vacate the premises of his house, not understanding why, saying, why are you kicking me out of my own house? It's of course then revealed to us that he doesn't actually own the house. It's in his parents' name, but he was granted residentiary privileges by his Aunt Ginny. Of course, Jesse saying, what the hell happened? His father then saying, what happened is you're a speed manufacturer. And my goodness, when Jesse sort of says what, no, I might even try to play it here real quick. I think I can get away with it. But this read here of, again, I think I gotta sort of, in order to oblige the copyright here, I might even try to turn this up, but let's see here. This read here of Jesse sort of saying, what? No, I'm not a speed manufacturer, definitely reminded me of in season 3 of Breaking Bad, where Skyler confronts Walt on being a drug dealer. The sort of, it almost even became a meme, like Walt's reaction, like, what? No, what's like just being a horrible liar. And of course, the sort of horrible reading of that lie, or the like reading done from Walt's perspective, is of course magnified by us, the audience, because we know exactly what Walt's been doing. But when Jesse sort of says that I'm not a speed manufacturer, really sort of made me think to the sort of exact sort of same premise of a reaction that Walt will give to Skyler next season. So,
I'm not. What?
Again, that's just, again, it's like, it's so funny. Like, it's in just with the benefit of hindsight, and of course, even in with the benefit of being in the moment and us seeing everything that Jesse's done over the course of Breaking Bad, it just, in a very sort of dark way, it definitely sort of made me laugh and harken back to that scene in season 3 of Breaking Bad. So, great scene here through and through. But yeah, of course, to continue, it's then revealed to us that Jesse's parents then found out about the fact that he was a speed manufacturer, because, as I said a little bit earlier, when Hank goes over to Jesse's house, Jesse's mother's house, in the episode entitled it's Grilled, and the episode entitled Grilled, right? The episode's escaping me, right? Yeah, it was Grilled. Yeah, totally slipped my mind there. But in the episode entitled Grilled, when he's looking for Walter White during his disappearance, which of course indirectly leads him to Tuco Salamanca, what Jesse's mom says to him directly is that following the DEA agent coming to their house, she then used this as a sort of, I don't know if opportunity is the right word, but this then sort of made her go to Jesse's house and sort of go there and wonder what was going on with him. I would imagine she knocked, but of course he didn't answer, and then she let herself in, and she saw the sort of meth lab that Walt and Jesse used to cook in at the end of season 1 of Breaking Bad, of course, and then saying it's not there anymore, I cleaned it all up, which we of course saw him do in the episode entitled Bit by Dead Bee with Badger. And of course, following this, it's then revealed to us that if Jesse does not vacate the premises, his lawyer has been authorized by his parents to call the police. And of course, you can sort of understand the logic of his parents here in the moment where, as his dad says to him, we can't keep you from destroying your life, but you're not taking us down with you. And it is kind of true. I mean, the house is in their parents' name. If something were to happen, they absolutely could be, in many ways, liable, because a property that's in their name has been used to cook methamphetamine. And again, while they could absolutely plead deniability, et cetera, theoretically, not theoretically, but once they found out about it, they said, absolutely not, we can't keep going on with this, we could be held criminally responsible. And it is kind of interesting, if we remember down to season 3 of Breaking Bad, when again, but of course not Jesse, Saul Goodman would meet with Jesse's parents and this lawyer, I believe in the episode entitled Caballo Sin Nombre, if I'm not mistaken. But of course, you do wonder where, I guess theoretically, they should have turned Jesse into the police here, but immediately when they saw that, but they didn't. And again, I don't want to sort of get into the whole legal ramifications here, but of course it is then revealed to us that they never did file a police report or they never sort of disclosed this on the house renovation that a meth lab was in the basement, and they sort of needed to disclose that to the proprietor, to the not the proprietary, to any potential homeowner, which would Saul would constitute as fraud. Again, really sort of going into the nitty gritty here, but yeah, again, peeling back the various layers of the onion of Jesse Pinkman's backstory and upbringing here, and just a sort of interesting scene. And of course, the story will continue over the course of this episode, and it's quite a great one. So yeah, just a at Justin Cruz, his parents giving him tough love, but they didn't have to kick him out. Yeah, I suppose. And I guess they could have, helped him find some sort of temporary accommodations. But like I talked about a little bit earlier, I imagine that they have just given Jesse second chance after second chance after second chance. And, America's the land of second, third, fourth, fifth, 17th chances, if you will. But I guess that eventually I can just based on my reading of this relationship, this has been going on for so long. And eventually they say, enough, we can't do this anymore. So yeah, quite the scene here. At Robert Schmidt, Jesse is not a good person. I don't get why people think he's an angel compared to Walt. I've talked about that through and through at Robert Schmidt, but that's sort of a discussion for another time. But yeah, I would have to agree with you a little bit at Robert Schmidt there. I would have to agree with you for sure. At Hine though, I love Jesse Goodhart. I can't deny that. I mean, again, I'm not really sure what exactly that means, good heart. I think the creators even very intentionally at Hine gave Walter White the middle name Hartwell, where they kind of said that Walter White, deep down had that good heart as well. And if you say that Jesse has a good heart, I definitely think you can say that characters like Walter White have a good heart as well. But at the same time, despite someone having a good heart, it's quite amazing to just see what people with good hearts are capable of doing when their sort of backs are held up against the wall and their life circumstances drastically change, as Walter White's did at Hine when he was diagnosed with, at the time, terminal lung cancer. But yeah, just a lot of food for thought here. But again, I could talk about that till the cows come home in respect to, the way Jesse is viewed versus the way other characters are viewed in Breaking Bad. So again, at Coconut Head, it's kind of like it's the crux of it all. What does it mean to have a good heart? What does that mean, if you will? It's kind of like I don't even really know what that means. It's like can you have a good heart, but if you do anything at any point in your life that can be misconstrued as morally unethical, even if you're in sort of a questionable situation, does that not mean you have a good heart? Or are you a person with a good heart that's acting out in a sort of manner that goes against that? Again, it's really hard to define these terms at Coconut Head. This sort of, what does it mean to have a good heart? That's almost like a philosophical question, if you will. And with a lot of those sort of, types of, sciences like psychology, I feel like there's no right answer in any of this. And you can sort of have two, clinical psychologists with like PhDs, and they can be given the exact same information about someone, but their conclusions can be entirely different at Coconut Head. That's sort of just the way I view it in all of this. But yeah, it's a lot of food for thought. It's sort of like philosophical, almost existential, maybe not existential, but philosophical question, if you will, of what it means for someone to have a good heart here. But yeah, it's definitely something I've thought about for a long time. But yes, of course, following this great scene here, we then pick up with, much later in the day following Skylar leaving. It's then revealed to us that I suppose Walt had been home all day. I imagine he wasn't going to work, or maybe he went to work and came home. It's not really clear what the exact sort of chain of events that happened here was. But of course, Skylar then comes home, and Walt asks where she was, and she says, she was out. Again, in hindsight, being a little bit passive aggressive here for sure. Walt trying to make small talk here, just again asking her if everything's fine. Her, of course, saying yes when really everything is not fine. Skylar being very dismissive here, not really engaging Walt, again ignoring him, going sort of right into taking a shower after just being gone all day, not telling him where he is. And again, I guess this is a sort of interesting time to sort of get into it here, but again, you can sort of understand where Skylar is coming from, if you will, sort of trying to show Walt what it's like when someone just leaves you and doesn't say where they're going and doesn't give you any explanation. And, when Skylar was asking Walt questions like, how are things going? He was also giving her the exact same answers. For example, when he was first diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, she asked him how was his day. His response was just fine, when in reality, that didn't sum up the situation in its entirety. It wasn't even close. And Skylar's sort of giving him the sort of, exact same treatment that Walt gave to her. And can you maybe view it as a little bit petty? Maybe, if you will, but at the same time, yeah, Beth Montgomery, emotional payback. I think there's a lot of valid reasoning behind Skylar's actions as well, sort of, showing Walt how, this doesn't feel very good, does it? When one member of your family treats you this way and does this to someone, walks out, doesn't say where they're going, ignores them, says everything is fine when it clearly isn't. This is exactly what you were doing to me and to Walter Jr. and to your family. So, yeah, it's a... I can definitely sort of see what Skylar is doing here. And again, definitely that's not the whole story there for sure. The story will continue, and I have even more to say on all of this as well. But yeah, definitely sort of great setup scene here for sure. Great shot here of the cannabis that Jesse most likely definitely bought with that $600 that Walt gave him. Of course, I mean, if this scene just doesn't just sum up Jesse Pinkman, at least how his character was in this moment, I really don't know what scene does. Of course, it's absolutely heavily implied to us that following this announcement by his parents that he had 72 hours to vacate the premises, he instead just used that $600 to buy marijuana and methamphetamine and basically just smoke the entire 600, as Walt would say to him later in this episode, where he sort of completely ignored this heed, thinking that his parents were just bluffing again, and decided to just, do nothing for 3 days. Decided to basically just get high and do nothing. That's essentially what he did here. Of course, following this third day when he has to vacate the premises, his mom then wakes him up in his bedroom. Jesse, of course, initially wondering how she got in here. Of course, she has the key. Of course, what I just spoke about how Jesse sort of thinking this is just a wake-up call. Just sort of, again, giving his mom lip service in the moment. Of course, great scene here. Again, I didn't even really notice it the first couple of times I watched this scene, but when Jesse's sort of taking the blinds down here because he was sleeping during the day, we can see his mom looking right at the meth pipe and the sort of ground up meth that Jesse has here on this tray. Sort of, he'll never change. Sort of, almost a sort of Charles McGill vibe that I'm getting a little bit here, where she's just staring at this meth, just shaking her head, just saying like, almost sort of saying there really is no hope for this man, is there? There's no hope for this kid. Of course, Jesse sort of saying, giving his mom lip service in hindsight. I mean, was he really serious about taking classes and turning his life around? Was he really serious about that in the moment? I don't think so. I really don't think so. I mean, maybe like 0.1% of him was serious about that, if that, but it really seemed to me he was just giving his mom lip service. And in his mind, even though he's saying this to his mom right now in the moment, if and when he got that call from Walter White, Jesse's going to go back to making meth again. I mean, that's just who Jesse is. Of course, when Jesse then sees the movers coming, he thinks this is just a wake-up. I thought this was just a wake-up call. You're being serious. It's, of course, then revealed to us, some back and forth dynamic here. I don't want to get too much into it, where Jesse's sort of saying, I earned this. I took care of Jenny. You weren't even there. Clearly, this sort of hitting a nerve for his mom and her not really wanting to get into the sort of entire backstory of all of this. Jesse sort of saying, I'm entitled to live here. She wanted me here. But of course, despite all of that and all of that sort of emotional pleading, at the end of the day, Jesse has no legal sort of... what's the word I'm looking for? No legal standing to live in this house. He has to be, he cannot live in this house. They could call the police and have him escorted off for trespassing. So, again, a whole sort of family dynamic here where, I talked about it a little bit earlier, where I think, even though deep down, Jesse's parents, I would say, care for him in some respect. Again, and we can sort of maybe, it seems in the moment maybe to the audience that, wow, his parents are being really cold here and giving him the real cold shoulder. We have only known Jesse for a little period of time, and they have known him for, I guess, what, 24 years. And I can imagine that even when Jesse was a teenager, maybe even as young as 14, he was acting up and doing all of these sort of things that were just driving his parents crazy. Maybe this was really going on for a decade. And again, I sort of think back to the movie El Camino, where Jesse calls his parents, again, in hindsight, under false pretenses to get him out of the house so he can go in and break into the safe and take the guns. But him saying to them, whatever happened with me, it wasn't your fault. Sort of basically saying it's on me what I did with my life. And again, it's so complicated here in respect to how we think Jesse's parents should act towards him. We don't know the full story. We don't know what it was like for them to live with this child and then adult for as long as they did, and sort of probably seeing him just again and again, just using drugs and, not really doing much with his life, and now resorting to manufacturing drugs. Again, it's a pretty, I would say, pretty nuanced situation here, and it's hard to sort of really say what's right and what's wrong here without knowing the full story. And at the end of the day, it's sort of just up to you as the audience to sort of extrapolate out how you want to just view this scene right here in respect to the sort of the grand overarching story of Jesse Pinkman. But yeah, of course, following this, we then see this is again supposed to be the same morning, a couple days later. Walt's again trying to do a very sort of desperate, overcompensating breakfast. Of course, we then see Lewis. This may have been a recast. I talked about this in season 1 of Breaking Bad, where there was a kid when Walter White got arrested. Not arrested, but sort of detained for illegally trying to buy beer underage. We saw a kid with a long, I guess, almost bleach blonde ponytail, and he was listed under the credits as Lewis, but this is also Lewis, and it was never revealed to us whether or not Lewis was recast, I guess, or whether or not Walter Jr. has two friends named Lewis. That's sort of the, again, really nitpicking here, really getting into the weeds, if you will, but of course, setting that aside, we great sort of shot of Walter White here when he says, who's Flynn, where of course he first offers Lewis here an omelet, but he says, I'm just ready here to pick up Flynn. And of course, it's then revealed to us that Walter Jr. is going by Flynn. Again, him sort of also, I don't want to say acting out because that's sort of, again, a loaded term, but again, him showing, I guess, his displeasure and the sort of the way he was impacted by the actions of his father here over the course of season 2 of Breaking Bad, even season 1, sort of, it's very clear that he's, trying to maybe send a message to his father here a little bit. His mom even saying that Walter Jr. is also trying to form his own identity here. Again, I think it's a little column A, a little column B, but yeah, also we get to see Walter Jr. sort of voice his displeasure with Walt's actions as well. At Luke Cockburn, considering the younger sibling and the amount of effort to better Jesse, a grown drug addict, or his sibling, a young, seemingly innocent student, it's not even worth their time, especially considering the consequence. Yeah, I mean, I see what you're getting at there at Luke Cockburn, and I've talked about that as well in respect to how, I would imagine that Jake and Jesse were more or less given the same opportunities in life. I guess unless, Jesse's parents, their sort of financial situation drastically changed from when Jake was born to from when Jesse was born. There seems to be quite the a solid age disparity. But of course, again, we'll sort of never know in respect to the sort of nature-nurture debates. And, again, like I've talked about, you can talk to many psychologists and they will have an opinion on whether it is more nature, or it is more nurture, and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, for sure, I've definitely thought about sort of how Jake is the sort of polar opposite of Jesse Pinkman and is basically the son that they never had. He's the exact opposite of Jesse Pinkman. You can just see the sort of love and the praise and the pride that exudes by his parents towards Jesse's brother Jake when we saw him in season 1 of Breaking Bad. So yeah, it's I see it for sure. I see what you're getting at. So yeah, Justin Cruz, that is kind of, again, I'm so nitpicking here, but he did say to Lewis red and green chilies, but I swear they were red and yellow in the shot that we saw here in in this opening scene. Yeah, they're definitely red and yellow, unless I'm colorblind. So again, nitpicking for sure. Breaking Bad ruined, horrible show, plot hole, can't deal with it. As the meme goes. Just kidding. But of course, following this, we then see Walt confront Skylar regarding, what's with this Walter Jr. Of course, her saying that Walt wants to sort of form his own. Walt Jr. wants to form his own identity, and what you did really upset him. Again, Walt sort of being taken back by all this, sort of seeing the cold shoulder that Skylar is giving him, not really, saying much to him. Giving him more, not quite the complete silent treatment, but, being very dismissive and ignoring him on purpose, as I discussed, the reasoning why a little bit earlier in the scene previous. Of course, Skylar then completely ignores what Walt is saying, sort of saying, shouldn't you get the phone? Of course, Walt picks it up, but he's totally flabbergasted by the fact that he's called by Jesse Pinkman when he is told that what part of no contact didn't you understand. We see the back and forth here where Walt eventually confronts Skylar saying, where are you going? She says, out, which I guess is technically true, sort of telling, more of the truth than Walter White is telling. She is going out. She's just not telling the sort of full truth. And, while she's, I don't know, there's definitely a difference between not telling the full truth and sort of telling, I guess it's sort of a white lie, if you will. I mean, there's probably a better word for it, but again, being very dismissive as on purpose, as I discussed a little bit earlier. During the scene prior, sort of showing Walt, how this doesn't feel very good when your family treats you this way. Of course, he then realizes that Jesse's calling him back, sort of basically saying your problems are just your problems, no contact. Of course, Jesse trying to tell him that he needs his half of the money, Walt being completely dismissive here, him basically saying that, before he's even able to tell Walt, Walt hangs up. Of course, he tries to tell Walt that he's effectively going to be homeless, and that's why he needs his half of the money. Of course, eventually, great scene when he calls Walt that third time, and Walt just rips the phone out of the socket there. Just absolutely hilarious. So where Jesse then cuts his hand on the cell phone. Let me see if I can sort of find this scene here. But yeah, great scene through and through. Again. Gotta play around. Whoops. Oh yeah, when Jesse calls back for the third time, trying to tell him that he's homeless, I need my half of the money, I literally have nowhere to go. I mean...
Son of a bitch!
I mean, great scene. I mean, I couldn't do it justice by explaining it, but yeah, great scene there through and through. And yeah, again, like I talked about, really sort of displaying to us that it's always something else with these two characters. No matter how much they try to fix one problem, another problem just arises. And we get to see the sort of continuation of this, where we get to see Jesse Pinkman as a homeless person for an entire day. So, at Sam Fisher, what is up? Just show this episode with my roommate, lol. That is great. Stop showing him Better Call Saul after Fun and Games, as it spoils Breaking Bad. Oh, that's actually quite interesting. That is actually quite interesting at Sam Fisher from that perspective. I didn't even really consider that if he hadn't seen Breaking Bad and was watching Better Call Saul first. That's quite something right there. Yeah, Charlie Hennings, that's a whole nother thing about how, again, it's so complicated in that respect, where, even kids who are good, act out in a certain way. And, just because someone is a really good student and is sort of, even mentally sort of very intelligent and advanced. I mean, doing sort of reports in middle school on like, and understanding the sort of, what was it? The sort of toxic chemicals that the paper was using to, produce their paper, like really sort of extrapolating out and being quite intelligent. At the same time, I mean, yeah, I guess he did use, he did have that, I guess, joint on him. And we'll never know the sort of reaction that his parents would have had, had he, been caught with that marijuana cigarette. And it is kind of funny. You also don't know what Jake would sort of do, whether he could sort of throw Jesse under the bus. And of course, they would immediately think that the two things were correlated, where, my God, we have Jake interact with Jesse even a little bit, and now he's using drugs. Oh my goodness. we can't have our son anywhere near this man. But yeah, again, so complicated at Charlie Hennings. We could really just think and think and think about it. But yeah, great, great point you raised there for sure. Again, great scene here through and through. And again, it's kind of funny. I mean, Jesse really doesn't take much with him here, does he? Just a couple of vinyls, like it looks like a pair of sunglasses, maybe a couple of these like oversized sweatshirts, and that's pretty much all of his possessions that he takes with him here. Pretty funny here for sure. Of course, he then crashes with his, or at least attempts to crash with his friend Paul here, if you will, a former bass player for the band Fallacies, and of course we know that we saw that sort of Breaking Bad webisode where there were two of them, the sort of Fallacies music video, as well as the sort of behind the music, if you will, video that they made that Jesse tried to get on VH1. That's sort of a, you can definitely check that out if you will. That sort of, I guess that sort of came after this or before this. I'm not 100% sure, but it is kind of funny. I was sort of going back and looking at the music video and that other video, and I'm not sure if this character Paul was the bass player. Their bass player kind of had long hair. I don't know if they were trying to sort of explain to us or sort of very subtly explain to us that when he was in the band, he had longer hair, but now that he's sort of not in the band anymore and is sort of just a regular, working stiff, if you will. He sort of has to have a normal businessman haircut. But yeah, great scene here for sure, where we sort of see the, I guess, the interesting relationship of these two characters. Pretty funny, where Paul is sort of, I guess, definitely in hindsight, romanticizing Jesse's lifestyle, if you will, talking about how, still having mad relations out there. Jesse saying, yeah, it's pretty crazy, man. When in reality, that hasn't been his life at all. It's just been him getting, beaten up by drug dealers and dealing with all of this crap with his parents and with Walter White. Of course, him telling the lie that's saying, can I crash here for a couple of days because my house is getting bug bombed? Of course, not really telling him that he was evicted from his parents' house because he's a speed manufacturer. And of course, as soon as Paul's wife returns and says, can I see you, in the bedroom for a minute, help me with these bags? Jesse knows that, there's no way that his wife wants this sort of, drug addict to live with them for a couple of days, especially with their young son. You can kind of understand where his wife's coming from here. And of course, following Jesse reading the writing on the wall, sort of great, funny, great, very funny idiosyncrasies and subtleness, and even the dialogue where he says, I used to not like carrots too, trying to, awkwardly bond with this, I don't even know how old this kid is, 6-year-old, 7, 8-year-old child or something like that. We then see Paul, most likely telling a lie, not wanting to hurt Jesse's feelings, saying, I totally forgot my in-laws are going to be here, so you can't be here. Jesse, of course, pretending like, hey, man, no big deal, in-laws sucks to be you, trying to be like, no sweat, I got tons of people to call. But of course, following him not being able to stay with Paul here, this was actually a really interesting scene that I thought about with the benefit of hindsight after the, 24th time, if you will, that I've seen this episode. But it's kind of crazy where we see him calling an unknown person. I don't believe that we know that he's calling either Combo or Skinny Pete, but he does say in this phone call that he called Badger, and no one can let him crash with him. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, this sort of had to be done to drive the plot forward and sort of get to the point where Jesse is going to sleep in that RV to sort of make the story have this sort of linear trajectory and have it make sense. But with the benefit of hindsight, it actually is quite interesting where we know in the El Camino movie that Badger and Skinny Pete are living together, and with the benefit of hindsight, you wonder why in the world would they have not let Jesse crash together, let Jesse crash at their place when he had nowhere else to go. That's something I've definitely thought about, and of course, because at the time, we had actually never even knew that Skinny Pete and Badger even knew each other that well. They had never been in a scene together as of this point, so it had not yet been written into the story how tight-knit of a character those two people were. Again, if you sort of extrapolate it out and use artistic liberties, I guess you would imagine or surmise that at the time they didn't live together like they did in El Camino. Maybe they were, I even remember back to the episode entitled Rabid Dog where, oh my God, I can't believe I blanked on Patrick Kubi's name, where Patrick Kubi basically says I put a bug on the tall kid's mom's place. All they did was talk about something called Babylon 5. It's definitely possible that at this time, Badger still lives with his mom, and maybe Skinny Pete's living arrangements are such that He can't let Jesse stay with him, and Combo can't let him stay with him as well. It's definitely possible that, Badger and Skinny Pete don't live together until later down the road, until after the story. Maybe, once they start selling Jesse's meth in this season, they're able to earn a little bit of income and get their own place. But it's definitely possible. I mean, neither of them are arrested. And I mean, Badger's arrested, but he's not charged with anything, so I wouldn't imagine there would be that much asset seizure from him. Maybe there would be. I'm not a lawyer, but yeah, it's definitely, Justin Cruz, I don't know. It was never revealed to us who he was talking to. He said he already asked Badger, and like I said, with the benefit of hindsight, I don't want to be like, oh, major plot hole here. With the fact that why in the world wouldn't Badger and Skinny Pete, if they were actually that tight, let them crash with him based on what we know from El Camino. But like I talked about, you can definitely use artistic liberties to explain away that scene. But yeah, of course, following Jesse just getting, obviously overcome with emotions here where he really feels like, he has nothing and nobody. I mean, it makes a ton of sense. His parents kick him out. Walt wants nothing to do with him. All of his, people who are his friends, or maybe he thought were better friends than they actually were in this moment, aren't letting him crash with him. I'm literally going to be homeless. I don't have any money to my name. All I have is this motorcycle and a couple of belongings. And as soon as I round the corner, I then find out that someone managed to steal my motorcycle. And then he says, but you cannot be serious. Just talk about just one low after another, after another, after another. And again, as bad as Jesse was feeling right here in this scene, it's so, as much as I like to hate on Jesse, I mean, in the moment, you can still sort of feel for the character and understand how much it would suck to go through what he's going through right here in this scene. And, him just basically saying, you could not be serious. I'm literally homeless. I have nowhere to go. But of course, eventually he racks his brain and goes to, Badger's cousin's Clovis, I guess, I don't know if what you would call it, junkyard, or sort of, I don't even know what you would call this, his sort of shop. Again, the name is sort of blanking here. It's not really a junkyard. I guess it's more of a, I don't know what you would call it. There's definitely a name for this, what you would actually call this sort of place right here. I want to maybe lots, if you will. I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what technical line of business he's in here. But we see him sort of go over to the lot, which we know he towed the RV to in the episode entitled Bit by Dead Bee, and Jesse realizing there's nowhere else that I can go if I don't want to sleep out on the street tonight. I have no money. I have no resources. Everyone is cutting me out of their life right now. I'm literally at rock bottom, seemingly. Salvage yard? All right, at John 82 salvage yard. All right, I appreciate that for sure. That definitely was slipping my mind there for sure. And of course, Jesse then realizes that he's going to climb this fence here and step on this porta potty. Definitely likely done by a stunt double for sure. A lot of the climbing scenes, and definitely the scene where he falls through the porta potty. And my goodness, what a great scene here for sure when he falls through this. Again, I mean, you don't even have to see the sort of visuals here of this scene, but when this scene when the stunt double falls through this porta potty here, my God. I mean, this would be just absolutely brutal if this happened to you. My goodness gracious, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, it somehow manages. That expression on Jesse's face, it somehow manages just to get worse. I mean, my God, after the day that Jesse had, he got kicked out of his house. He feels like he was just completely emotionally abandoned every which way. He is now literally covered in human excrement. Just, oh my goodness gracious. Again, I almost feel bad for laughing, but it's sort of like, it's so hysterical at Beth Montgomery, I agree, but it's also so dark in many respects. And at the same time, you have to remember he cut his hand pretty bad on that phone. And, probably, maybe, hurting to get a not so great infection there when you have all that sort of, human excrement getting into your bloodstream. Not good for sure. Just, my God, you sort of feel for Jesse here, where he's literally just, I mean, you understand the emotions he's experiencing, where he literally just breaks down in tears and just starts crying. And, I mean, it's sort of a logical explanation to what he just went through, where he just, my God, just sinking lower and lower and lower. And just literally here being covered in shit, sleeping on basically the floor of this RV on a laid out cardboard box. My God, what a scene here for sure. And yeah, it's a again, I don't know why, but I have to play this scene here. I don't know, for any Family Guy fans out there, that scene of Jesse falling through that through that porta potty. Definitely reminded me of when Peter was in the outhouse here, and it's knocked over by the bird. It definitely sort of made me think of Jesse Pinkman for sure.
Oh! Oh, God! Oh, it's everywhere! Ah! It's in my raccoon wounds! Oh, God!
Oh man, so dark but so funny. But yeah, that's basically what Jesse went through there. That pretty much sums it up. And my God, that sucked for Jesse. But again, as Paul Sura pointed out in that community post tab, as bad as this gets for Jesse here, again, this is not even rock. This is not even close to rock bottom for Jesse Pinkman. It's just gonna get worse and worse and worse for his character. And as I've said, I don't know if I have. Again, I definitely can understand why this would suck so bad for him in this moment right here. But at the same time, that such unbelievably telling piece of dialogue that Mike gave to oh my god, the names are slipping me, to Jimmy at the time in Bad Choice Road about we all make our choices and those choices put us on a road. Jesse Pinkman made every single choice that he did over the course of this this series so far up into this episode 204 right here. Now he is living with the consequences of those choices. All those choices led him to right here sleeping on this cardboard box in an RV covered in human shit. And, in the moment right now, nothing can be done about that. And he just sort of has to, reap the consequences of his own actions here. And he has no one else to blame but himself in many respects. And I know a lot of people say, well, Jesse was manipulated, etc., etc. But as I've talked about over the course of these reviews of Breaking Bad, seasons 1 and 2, he had so many opportunities to get out, and he continued to go down this path. And now he's suffering for it. And in every sort of piece of that expression of suffering for it. So, of course, great continuation here where in this following sort of going back and forth in between these two scenes here with Jesse Pinkman and Walt and his family, which will, of course, converge and overlap at the end of this episode. But, of course, we then see yet another day of Skyler giving Walt the cold shoulder. Definitely appears to be more of a weekend here because Walter Jr. doesn't look like he's about to go to school. Of course, him asking where's breakfast. Walt, of course, first thing when he asks where's mom, he, of course, gives the very sort of, I don't know what your word, sort of sarcastic answer of out as she's giving to him. And again, when this finally sort of comes to blows, I'll sort of talk about this in more detail. But of course, Walt, I guess, probably feeling a little bit, I guess, rejected by his family in the exact same way that Jesse was rejected by his. Again, the sort of parallels very intentional here by the creators in this episode, where while it's different, both characters are, being rejected by their family with the sort of grand irony that Walt is trying to do all of this for his family. And of course, he decides to take his son, Walter Jr., driving. Of course, based on his physical condition, he has to drive, or he's more comfortable driving with both feet on both pedals, the gas and the brake. When the standards that you only drive with one and move your foot from the gas to the brake. Of course, sort of again. I mean, I always sort of wondered back about the sort of grander sort of meaning and symbolism behind this scene. And again, eventually it will extrapolate outward, despite the fact that there's some clear tension here in the scene, and Walter Jr. is having trouble driving in the sort of correct manner, and he ends up hitting the cone. And of course, later down the road, he then reveals to Walt that he learned that as long as he has a doctor's note, that the MVD, the DMV, will allow him to drive that way. And Walt eventually comes to terms, well, if it long as it gets you to point A to point B safely, then who am I to complain? That's where it will eventually go down the road. But yeah, I mean, this scene here, again, I was racking my brain actually for sort of grander sort of meaning and symbolism in this scene. But yeah, definitely a sort of, this scene will definitely come full circle down the line. And even the sort of relationship that Walt has with Walter Jr., with him eventually buying him that's a brand new Charger later down the line in Breaking Bad. But yeah, just a pretty great scene here for sure, where we can also sort of see that, I guess, dynamic tension that's happening between Walter Jr. and Walt, and how, while he's not giving him as much of the cold shoulder, just changing the name, which he likes to go by, is nothing compared to what Skylar is doing to him. You can definitely sort of also see that continued building tension between these two characters, like Skylar and Walter were going through, but much more overtly obvious for sure. Of course, then following this great scene of Clovis here waking up in the morning and then realizing that someone has effectively broken in and crashed through his toilets, his portable toilets, and walked into the RV. A great scene here where he threatens him, of course, not realizing who it is, pointing the shotgun at him, saying, hands up, asshole, for the love of God, I will sort of spread you here. I will kill you if you make any moves. Jesse then reveals that it's him. Clovis basically wanting his compensation for towing the RV, not to mention fixing the toilets, including fixing up the toe in the RV, basically saying, 1,500 and you're free to drive on out of here. Of course, Jesse, obviously wanting to pay him and not wanting him to take his cook stuff, basically saying, I can get you the money, but not right now. Clovis, of course, just thinking this is just some, pathetic junkie who's saying anything to, get him to not take his cook stuff. Basically, Jesse saying, please, I really need a break on this one. You have no idea what kind of, couple of, days that I've had. Of course, Clovis not buying any of this, kicking him out of the his lot completely. Great sort of scene here where he's sort of going over with someone who he says he knows will pay top dollar for this stuff, this illegal meth cooking stuff. When he talks about the methylamine, he's even surprised about how much it would be worth. We can definitely harken back to season 1 of Breaking Bad in the episode entitled A No Rough Stuff Type Deal, where Jesse said to Walt that the sort of crew wanted 10 grand to rip off the methylamine, so you would imagine that he could get, around that for an entire barrel of it. Well, not an entire barrel, but a partially filled barrel of it. But, of course, before he's even has time to sort of really grasp how much money in paraphernalia that he has in his RV, Jesse, of course, climbs the fence, floors it in the RV, breaks through the gates, and drives away. And, of course, definitely reminded me of Better Call Saul season 1, if I'm not mistaken, in the episode entitled Bingo, where, the Kettlemans wanted to go to the police to report Saul, Jimmy, for stealing their money. But of course, as he reminds them, criminals have no recourse. So Clovis definitely cannot go to the police and report this because he himself would be culpable for the sort of illegal actions that he did in this scene over the course of this series as well. So just a great scene here, great piece of foreshadowing for the fact that this story is not completely over. I really did like Clovis as a character. He was one of my favorite sort of minor supporting characters. And it's actually kind of, I talked about this a little bit earlier too in my reviews of this. It's actually like a little bit too bad in my opinion how he sort of very abruptly ended his time on Breaking Bad. Again, not because he was intentionally so, but there really was no longer any need for his character once the RV was destroyed, where his sort of premise was storage for the RV, and of course, once eventually Hank finds out about it and it has to be destroyed, and we then use that as a vessel to introduce Joe in the junkyard. That's really sort of more where Walt and Jesse go towards in order to use someone to help them with their sort of nefarious enterprise, their illicit enterprise, and there really wasn't any need for Clovis's character. But again, I liked Badger's cousin. I really liked the character. I thought he did a really good job of sort of encapsulating sort of what a person in his position would act and be like. And yeah, I really enjoyed this sort of this scene with him, and I really enjoyed his appearance over the course of this series for sure. Ooh, of course, following this, we then finally see this scene sort of finally come to a head. We kind of see the sort of final climax here, if you will, of this sort of scene of Walt and Skyler. Of course, following Walter Jr. going out because Lewis took him to school. Walt then sort of uses this as an opportunity to tell Skyler that he wants to talk. Of course, Skyler, thinking initially that he's going to come clean about everything that's been going on, he initially gives a sort of very heartfelt apology and sort of saying, I'm sorry I put you through what I put you through. It isn't fair. I don't want to lose you, saying the sort of right things here. Skylar saying, yes, I know, I understand. Of course, following Walt saying all of this, he then sort of, apologizes for acting the way he did and not being sort of forthright with Skylar. But of course, following this, Skylar's sort of saying, and isn't there something else you want to tell me? You're clearly not telling me everything. Of course, Walt continues to sort of play dumb here, sort of plead ignorance, saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Again, clearly in no real mental state to come clean about everything that has happened regarding his time cooking methamphetamine. And if anything, this would make things worse, if you will. I couldn't imagine that Skylar would want to stay with him in this moment right here. And of course, at the same time, Walt basically saying, what, you think I'm having an affair? Is that what you think with the second cell phone? I'm not having an affair. Him being absolutely forthright and true about that. But again, Skylar is not stupid. She clearly knows something is going on. And of course, to sort of paraphrase a Chris Rock joke, sort of Walt wanting credit for something that he's supposed to do. Like, you're supposed to be faithful to your wife, and sort of, even that line of Skylar saying to him, you're not having an affair. Congratulations, you're so great for you. Should be praised for not having an affair. So of course, her being very dismissive, not dismissive, but her being very aware that Walt is not being completely forthright here, and her just pressing Walt, and Walt again doubling, tripling, quadrupling, quintupling down on all of this, saying, there's nothing here. I'm not doing anything wrong. When, again, he's sort of just trying to, have Skylar back down, where he's basically saying, you can't prove anything. You can't prove anything about what I've been doing. I'm not doing anything wrong. He even, of course, says, earlier in his initial apology where, my cancer is no excuse for the way I've been acting. Again, just pressing and pressing here, claiming that, there's clearly something wrong, Skylar. You clearly think I'm doing something. I'm not having an affair. You clearly think it's something. So what do you think it is? Sort of basically saying, tell me what you think I'm doing. You of course, in Walt's mind, him saying, you have proof of nothing. You can't prove anything. I'm not doing anything. Of course, I don't think in Skylar's mind she could even conceptualize what Walter White was actually doing. But again, she knows he clearly has a secret and is not being completely honest about his life. Again, her basically saying everything that I discussed over the course of this episode. All right, you want me to talk? Then you want to talk? Then talk. Tell me what's going on. You're disappearing, these obviously desperate breakfasts, this overcompensation. There's clearly something you're not telling me. Tell me what is going on. Of course, Skylar, again, it's sort of, it all goes back to Better Call Saul. I sort of think back to D.A. Oakley and him talking with, Saul in the hallway, basically saying how you knew about Salamanca and you let him get off on those charges. And Saul basically saying that's a lot of talk, prove it. And him saying back to him, there's proving and there's knowing. And while Skylar can't prove anything, she knows in her heart of hearts, that Walt is acting up. In the same way, during that great speech in Chicanery where, Chuck says to, I guess everybody in the courtroom, I knew he switched those numbers, I just couldn't prove it. And the same way that Skylar is saying, I know you're doing something wrong, I just, I can't prove anything, but I know something is wrong. There's something is not right here. And of course, Walt then just, again, quintuples down on all of us and says, tell you what? What do you want me to tell you? I have nothing to tell you. Of course, Skylar then just absolutely just at the end of her rope here, flabbergasted, just storms out, just leaves, as she's always done. I can't deal with this. You're clearly lying to me about something. Walt, of course, saying, do you know what I've done for this family? Again, showing his pride, exuding a little bit here in what he's done, but at the same time, not wishing he could sort of be prideful and forthright about everything he's doing, but at the same time understanding how illegal and clandestine and nefarious all of his actions are. And again, it is quite ironic where down the line where eventually he gets paid over the course of the season where, he even says to Saul that it can't be blind luck or some imaginary relative that saved our family. I did this, me, but at the same time, I can't be forthright and honest about how this money was made. So a lot of cognitive dissonance here with Walter White. that he has to sort of undertake here, where he wants to be prideful, but he knows he can't be, and he doesn't want to sort of undercut his pride by saying that this money came from a sort of, just basically fell out of the sky or was based on luck. And of course, we even see that down the line during that great party scene when everyone's praising Gretchen and Elliot, and Skylar's basically thanking them for Walter White's positive cancer diagnosis, when in reality they didn't pay for anything. And we just see Walter White's pride exude over the course of that episode. Of course, not even wanting to get too far ahead of myself here, but of course, then great scene where following this, Walt then sees the RV parked right in his driveway. Great look by Walt, and of course, just like, one thing after another, just like, I cannot believe I have to deal with this right now with Jesse. Great scene here for sure, where he confronts Jesse again. The facial expressions were just unbelievable. Of course, him saying, "What are you doing here? Why are you blue?" Again, him being repulsed by the sort of rancid smell that is permeating from Jesse's clothes. At Sam Fisher, "Why are you blue?" Absolutely hilarious scene. Again, finally, Jesse basically trying to state his piece, trying to tell him what he couldn't tell him on the phone, basically saying, "They kicked me out of my house, everything's going to shit for me." And then, of course, before Jesse can even say his piece, Walt then proceeds to just denigrate and cut him down, saying, like, "Are you this stupid? Are you incapable of listening to instructions? What would have happened if Skylar saw you? Did you plan for that contingency? What was the plan then? Genius." Kind of saying, "Are you this sort of imbecilic?" I'm sort of, bastardizing the dialogue a bit. But of course, Jesse basically saying, I'm sorry. I understand your grievances." Again, I'm sort of explaining Jesse's train of thought here. But he then basically says, "I just need my half of the money and I'll go." And I'm trying to find again that sort of perplexed look on here we go. That sort of perplexed look that Walt gives on his face when Jesse says, "I just need my half of the money and I will go." What a great expression when Walt is literally like, "Your half? There is no your half. There's only all of it. We were 50-50 partners. I got my half, you got your half. You lost your half. I'm not like it's not." In my mind, the agreement wasn't, "I then give you half of my half. Why should I be penalized for your carelessness?" Jesse, of course, saying that's not cool. If we're 50-50 partners. Walter then, of course, exuding more of his own pride, basically saying, "Partners in what? What is it exactly you do around here? I cook. And, essentially I'm the distributor as well." Well, sort of, at least when dealing with Tuco, what he did in the previous season. But basically saying, "You're just a pathetic junkie who's too stupid to listen to rudimentary instructions," continues to insult Jesse. We can just, again, understand Jesse's pride is also getting really undercut here. And you can definitely understand just the way, just all of the shit that he had to go through over the course of this episode, just all of it sort of boiling over, and him just, not being able to, stand everything that he's saying to Walt, and really sort of taking out all of his frustration, not just what Walt's saying to him right now, but I can imagine just the frustration of, his family and his friends and his housing situation and everything, just totally taking it out on Walt here in the scene. And my God, what a great, just what a move there. Is that an MMA move? I'm not too well versed in it, but just grabbing Walt by the head and just slamming him into those cardboard boxes. Quite the scene there. We then see the sort of fight scene ensue where Jesse proceeds to choke him pretty severely. And of course, he then raises his fist, about to punch Walt in the face. Of course, Walt's saying, "Do it." Definitely a, in hindsight, an interesting piece of foreshadowing to the finale of Breaking Bad Felina, where he says "do it" when he basically says to shoot Walt and put him out of his misery. And again, I sort of wonder if that's also what Walt is sort of going for here, where he's basically just saying, like, "Just do it, just put me out of my misery, just kill me." I wonder if, like, maybe he doesn't sort of really mean that, but part of him does in the back of his mind, and that's what he's saying in the moment, just like, I have gone through so much crap right now. So of course, stuff that he's not even telling Jesse about, but sort of just, saying, "Put me out of my misery," essentially. But of course, Jesse can't bring himself to do it. Maybe because he has a good heart in the end, or maybe he knows that if he kills Walt, he's not going to get his half of the money. Maybe there's a little bit of both of that, if you will. But my God, what a great shot here of these two characters. Just, after this fight here, it just totally just exemplifies everything that they had to go through over the course of this episode, where, what an ordeal that they had to deal with. And I mean, it's kind of crazy. I mean, when Walt and Jesse first started this venture at the very beginning of season 1 of Breaking Bad, you could probably imagine that they had no idea that it would lead to all of the stuff that happened right now, and just all of the pain and suffering that these two characters have felt physically, emotionally, and otherwise, and how it's just, been detrimental to the relationships that they had prior to engaging in this with one another. It's just, what a great sort of final sort of way to wrap up this storyline here at the end of this episode. Of course, great scene when he comes in and basically tells Jesse try not to touch anything. He then goes to his, the vent here, the air vent here, where he's hiding the money, splitting it evenly. Of course, there's one bundle, two extra. It's a 5 to 4. He, of course, keeps the fifth bundle. Again, I can only surmise and speculate on what Walter White's thinking was here in this final scene about how, he kept that final bundle. He, of course, then gave Jesse that his sort of half of the money here in this kind of blue, I guess, what is this, like diaper bag, if you will. Probably very intentional in respect to the creators, having the bag be blue, putting it in the blue money, the bag and putting the money in the blue bag, definitely foreshadowing what is to come with the blue meth over the course of Breaking Bad. Again, a great final scene here too, where Walt says to Jesse after he gives him his half of the cash, and there's sort of Jesse washes his hands and cleans it up as much as he can. Says to Walt, want some breakfast? Jesse probably haven't eaten in days here. Probably really hungry, will sort of eat with Walt here. And again, it's kind of crazy where I always thought about this over the course of Breaking Bad, about how you sort of fill in the gaps and how the story sort of progresses from like day to day to week sometimes. Several days at a time, and there's all these sort of little things that happened in between with these characters that we never got to see on screen. And I only can imagine what a sort of scene between these two characters eating breakfast in Walter White's house may have been. But again, at the end of the day, you wonder, did they go out for breakfast after this? Did Walter White cook them breakfast? It's who knows. And at the end of the day, not every scene is going to be the sort of most interesting sort of thing in the world. I mean, if you put in every single little piece of these characters' lives in the story, you would get boring parts as well. I mean, there would get scenes with Walt just sitting around for an hour doing nothing. I mean, you would see him do everything. You'd see him brush his teeth every day. You'd see him do the sort of all the boring things that people do, and you're not going to want to see every little thing. But yeah, you do wonder. I mean, you wonder if this sort of ever crossed the creator's mind where, when scenes were put into Better Call Saul that took place in the Breaking Bad timeline. I mean, as well as in El Camino, where we got to see that scene in the diner following the episode 4 Days Out, where they finally got to, they didn't get to go to their Denny's, but they got to eat like they wanted to. Again, you wonder what that sort of breakfast scene was like here. Did they go out to a restaurant, and did they talk about anything? What was the sort of dynamic of that scene? I mean, could Jesse really go out smelling like that? Would he have to change first? And, wouldn't that sort of change whether or not they'd even be able to go out to breakfast or something to that effect? Did Walter White cook it for them? But I don't know. It's something it's the randomest things I've always sort of thought about this show, and probably is why I enjoy it so much, where I'm even willing to sort of extrapolate and think about these little teeny tiny details in this episode, and sort of think about all the things we didn't get to see over the course of Breaking Bad. So, at Sam Fisher, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate the support, man. Do you think this episode is the reason for people to support Jesse? What episode do you think influences people to support Walt as well? Well, again, I don't know. Again, thank you so much for the super chat. I don't know if there's one sort of moment specifically that causes, people to support Jesse. I don't know if it's, are you kind of insinuating that, when you first started watching the show, you maybe didn't support, not you specifically, I'm talking you in the general sense, that Sam Fisher, like someone may have not supported Jesse as much, but when they saw this scene, they supported him more. Again, I don't know if it was sort of really a sort of turning point moment for me specifically. I only can speak for myself at Sam Fisher, but again, I think it's a sort of long, complex, explanation. I really just think the entire story of Jesse Pinkman is what causes people to sympathize with him so much and to like him so much. I don't know if this is the very moment where people started to, support him. I really think that people probably gravitated towards his character from the very beginning. And I did as well. I definitely did. I definitely liked Jesse much more in the very beginning when I first started watching Breaking Bad compared to the very end of Breaking Bad. That is for sure. So I supported him well before this episode. If anything, my support dissipated significantly over the course of Breaking Bad. But yeah, it's an interesting point. And when you say what episode do you think influences people to support? Well, I mean, again, the whole premise of Walter White is what makes you support him. I mean, a sort of a 50-year-old man who really didn't do anything with his life, who was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. I mean, the initial story I feel is what supports Walter White. If anything, I really feel like you really sort of support these characters for different reasons, and you gravitate towards both these characters for different reasons, even at the very beginning of this series, just in my opinion. But over time, as I watch this show, my sympathy for these characters definitely dissipates and wanes at Sam Fisher. That's sort of the way I see it. That's sort of my interpretation of this. And yeah, I don't know about that. Did people really, I'm asking this rhetorically at Sam Fisher, did people really not support Jesse, and then all of a sudden, man, he really got screwed in this episode. Man, I support him. Maybe some people felt that way, but me personally, that's not how I sort of viewed these characters. That wasn't the prism by which I viewed these characters. But again, to each their own. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion of how they want to view these two characters. And that's the sort of great thing about watching a television show or a movie or any sort of, visual, artistic form. It's up to the interpreter. The beauty is in the eye of the beholder, as the cliche goes. So at Sam Fisher, I didn't care much for Jesse until Tuco pointed a gun at him and him falling in the porta potty. I mean, if that caused you to have more empathy and sympathy for him, yeah, I know what you mean. Just sort of seeing that visceral, raw, just, emotion of him not wanting to die in that moment where Tuco points an M16 at the back of his head and the back of his neck. So Down was really heavy-handed in punishing Jesse. I think, yeah, I mean, I can definitely agree with that at Sam Fisher. This was really the real beginning of really just seeing Jesse getting beat up physically and proverbially, really just getting the shit kicked out of him again and again and again and again. I do agree with that at Sam Fisher. But yeah, from my own perspective, I really sort of empathized and supported both these characters in different ways at the beginning of this series. And like I said, for me personally, I like Jesse at the very beginning much more than I did at the end of Breaking Bad, excuse me. And again, I don't know if it was really a real depth of sort of liking his character. I think it might have just been more a shallow, if you will, just kind of like, oh, this is sort of an interesting person with an interesting backstory, and I can kind of gravitate towards this, and it's kind of interesting to sort of take a sort of view from behind the scenes and sort of take a sort of, almost like be a fly on the wall of this very interesting person's life. At Sam Fisher. That's sort of the way I view Jesse Pinkman initially. I'm like, this is a sort of interesting person with a life that's completely different from mine, who lives a life which I hopefully will never experience in any way, shape, or form ever in the history of of my life. As much as we sort of maybe romanticize a part of these two characters' lives, I think at the end of the day, I think it really does truly portray it in the sort of real sort of light. It doesn't really romanticize it that much. I mean, you think about, wow, wouldn't it be cool to have a life like Jesse? It's so, like, exciting, and he's making all this money, and it's so invigorating. But I mean, I feel like you're sort of looking at the positives here, but think about just all the negatives that these characters have to go through. I mean, literally falling in human shit, sleeping on a cardboard box, getting a gun pointed at the back of your head, getting the shit beaten out of you by Tuco Salamanca, pardon my language, the YouTube algorithm, and also, Walter White just living with this fear of someone killing him in the middle of the night, not being able to sleep because he's worried that Tuco's going to track him down. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like romanticism kind of portrays things in a sort of, again, romantic, more on the positive light, but I really think this story shows this sort of world in all of its sort of true form, in all of the sort of negative, sort of gross and violence and just emotionally distressing and just stressful elements of this life that these two characters decided to lead. That's just my kind of opinion of all this, and why I really, really enjoy the show at Sam Fisher. So, at Luke Cockburn, that's strange to me considering Jesse seemed to be getting better / moral. That's strange to me considering Jesse seemed to get better / more moral after Gale's death. Oh, you're talking about how I'm sort of viewing him in him more of a negative light than by the fact that he decided to get more moral. I see well done at Luke Cockburn, but again, this is it's a very sort of complicated thing, and that's a really sort of great point you raised about. Yes, he does sort of try to go on the sort of more straight and narrow after Gale's death, but again, at the same time, he did sort of he did sell that methamphetamine to the support group when his sort of ego was he felt his ego was tarnished at Luke Cockburn. And again, at the end of the day, I don't hate. I've made this point. Maybe I wasn't clear, but like I try to be clear in this point. I do not hate Jesse Pinkman. I do not hate his character. I just don't understand the overt praise of his character and the fact that I feel like people sort of give him more benefit of the doubt and sort of explain away his actions and sort of apologize for his actions and kind of make it seem as though, Jesse really wasn't in control and he was manipulated and he was abused and et cetera, et cetera. I really feel like people just really don't sort of buy into that Mike Ehrmantraut premise where everything that happened to him, he put himself on that bad choice road. And truly, and again, I could go on and on and on about it. I just feel like he had so many opportunities to get out of this situation, but he kept going back. And yes, while you can say, he maybe sort of, I know what you mean, where he sort of definitely was very emotionally taken aback by the fact that he had to shoot Gale in the face. At the same time, I mean, you can definitely argue, and again, there's a whole sort of debate about this, about is it really that moral to sort of sell this methamphetamine to people and to sort of enable these people again? And as Gale even said, being that libertarian, these people are essentially going to do this anyway. So what's the difference if I make it for them if someone else does? But again, it's such a sort of, philosophical, ethical sort of debate, and we could really, I feel like, go back and forth. And I feel like, people who say to give Jesse a lot of support, I think, I think there's rightfully so. I can understand a lot of the sort of emotional empathy that people give to Jesse Pinkman. But at the same time, I feel like, I don't want to sort of romanticize everything that Jesse's gone through, if you will, if that sort of makes sense in respect to him sort of acting more moral after Gale's death. And I don't want to be sort of too dismissive here or too cynical, but I mean, was he sort of just feeling sorry for himself? Or did he really, why exactly did he feel, yes, I think he felt bad about Gale, absolutely, but he's also felt bad about himself. But again, I'm not a philosopher. I'm just a guy on the internet. And again, it's a really sort of interesting discussion you can go back and forth with. And I really feel like there's no right and wrong answer in any of this. So again, maybe I was a little bit unclear in respect to, I did say how I sort of liked his character less, but I feel like I didn't like his character less because of, anything that he did per se, but I feel like I kind of liked it less because of just the sort of ending that was crafted for him and the sort of perception that I've gotten from other fans of the show who I've talked about the sort of character of Jesse Pinkman with. I think that's where sort of my greater dislike of his character, if you will, comes in. But yeah, it's like I said, it's an interesting discussion, and there's really no right answer. You can go back and forth forever on it. So. At Sam Fisher, the sympathy is a lot of it. I feel like they wanted people to feel bad for Jesse. They wanted people to feel bad for Walt as well. Even characters like Hank, and there's so much depth and nuance to characters like Gus with his backstory. And it's a lot of intriguing backstories to a lot of these characters. So, what is up, Kate Valentine? How's it going? At Luke Cockburn, why do you think you lost sympathy for a situation when it got worse? Why do you think you lost sympathy as the situation got worse, if we even agree that he did a better... Why am I reading this? If we even agree he did get better as his life got worse. Again, I hope I addressed that at Luke Cockburn. I hope I addressed your question there in respect to my opinions on Jesse Pinkman. So... at Sam Fisher, thank you again so much for the super chat, man. Really appreciate the support. Every character has deep flaws in Breaking Bad. That is why that is why it's my favorite show. This episode, Skylar, was hard to watch, and so was Walt Lying. Funny that you mentioned it, at Sam Fisher. Speaking of which, I was just about to get onto Skylar's character here at the very end of this episode, but actually very great timing there at Sam Fisher for sure. And yes, every character does have very deep flaws. I feel like all human beings do. There are no saints among us. There really aren't. There are no perfect, angelic, saintful human beings that are walking among the earth right now. I mean, oh my goodness, if people have even seen, this is a heck of a pool, but my goodness, that Simpsons sort of two-part, it was a 2 or 3 part series, the sort of Ned Flanders Netflix special episodes, which I thought were really good. The title is escaping me. Those were actually really good. But even a sort of character like Ned Flanders even still has flaws. Like, human beings by definition are flawed. We are not perfect human beings by any stretch of the imagination. But moving on to Skylar here, great final scene where we see her pull into a gas station. I'm not sure if it was the same one that Walt was going to. I don't know if we can see. I think it is. I think this is the exact same gas station, if I'm not mistaken, that Jesse was at, and that Walt and Jesse were at, if I'm not mistaken. I definitely think that was intentional by the creators in hindsight. I could be wrong, but it definitely looks like that to me. But of course, we then see Skylar go to this gas station. And again, wouldn't it have been ironic if she somehow ran into Walt and Jesse here? But of course, we then see her pull out a cigarette and proceed to begin to smoke here. And of course, right before she lights the cigarettes, we see her being judged very, pretty harshly by this woman in this car, shaking her head, kind of saying like, my goodness, a pregnant woman smoking. I mean, my goodness gracious, what a horrible person. Doesn't she know? I mean, it's clear and obvious how smoking while pregnant is horrible for, not only you, but more, I guess, in the context that people view it, even worse for the baby than it is for you, in the way that that we all know. And of course, following this, judgment by this woman, we then see Skylar nonetheless light this cigarette, proceed to smoke it, and then, exhale here and really sort of, needing this cigarette, if you will, to sort of emotionally decompress. Now, of course, when I first watched this the very first time ever, I did say to myself, like, man, like, that's not a good look. Like, it's not good if you're pregnant and smoking. But at the same time, with the benefit of hindsight, I completely understand at Sam Fisher where Skylar is coming from here in this scene. And while her actions are maybe not the most moral or ethical here, I can definitely understand them by viewing them in the prism of how human beings how human beings act, and how the fact that human beings have deep flaws. Because if we remember here, we have to sort of put in the context where Skylar White is as a person right here and right now. I mean, she's almost 8-9 months pregnant with a baby they didn't intend. Her husband has been diagnosed with stage 3A terminal lung cancer. Her son has, this physical condition which is incredibly likely expensive to treat. We also have to remember that her sister, she just found out, is a kleptomaniac, and when she confronted her on it, she did not come clean. And of course, when she tried to talk about it earlier in the season, of course, Skylar said it really wasn't the right time because they were searching for Walt. She can't really confide in Hank right now because, he was kind of saying, we need to support Marie. We saw that great scene that happened in the premiere of season 1, the premiere of this season 2 of Breaking Bad, 737. So the world is really I can see Skylar's world sort of collapsing in on itself right now, and really I can understand how she just sort of has this amalgam of just emotional feelings that are racing through her head right now, not to mention all the hormones that are coursing through her body because she is pregnant. And she probably just wishes she could talk to somebody about this, but there really is no one in her life that she can even speak to regarding these feelings that she's having. And again, I kind of harken back to Howard Hamlin going to talk therapy in season 6 of Better Call Saul. But you have to remember, I mean, it's hard to find a therapist, and they have a sort of, their insurance isn't the best, and you wouldn't believe how expensive sort of therapy is for people, how expensive these sessions are, not let alone how difficult it is to find someone. So again, they're in no financial real situation probably to sort of, have Skylar go to therapy. And of course, I feel like, back when this takes place in 2008, sort of mental health was not as prevalent as it is right now. It's sort of me sort of using artistic license and liberty to sort of explain away Skylar's actions here. But I can understand how her emotions here in this scene, how, she's pregnant, her world is collapsing in on herself. She needs she is probably, the amount of stress that is coursing through her body probably isn't good for the child as well. I mean, all of that sort of cortisol and the stress hormones that she's experiencing because of what's happening in her life, all of that stress probably isn't good for her body and the baby as well. So, she just, all she can even do to address these feelings she's doing is to smoke cigarettes. And again, we sort of learned that Skylar was likely a former smoker in Breaking Bad, just based on what we learn over the course of this series. And of course, eventually when things really start to unravel in her life, and Walt just goes full on Heisenberg, and she's a sort of unwilling participant in all of this. She eventually just resorts to chain smoking, if you will, as a sort of mental coping mechanism, emotional coping mechanism. But yeah, I can, like I said, while Skylar's actions here, are probably not the best, you can, at the same time, I can definitely understand and rationalize them. But I guess the same thing could be said about Jesse Pinkman, if you will, in respect to how I didn't support a lot of his actions, but I can sort of rationalize them as well. But I don't know, maybe just sort of extrapolating it out, who is Skylar really hurting here besides herself and the child, if you will? And you could argue that, all of Jesse's methamphetamine manufacturing was not only hurting himself, but also hurting, the millions of people who were, millions or tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who were, or thousands of people who were taking his blue meth. So yeah, just through and through, great episode here. At Sam Fisher, I hope that sort of explained it, if you will. That's sort of my interpretation of why Skylar is doing this, at Sam Fisher. And again, it's kind of interesting. This, again, is sort of such a nitpick here. But if you're in the very next episode, we see that she flushed the cigarettes down the toilet, and Walt ends up fishing them out. But if you look at the pack, it sort of looks like a nondescript, like, sort of fake pack of cigarettes that doesn't even exist, that's sort of made for television. But for anyone here who has ever smoked a cigarette, you can clearly see that eagle here on the side of this cig, and that is a tried and true trademark of an American Spirit cigarette right there. So it's actually it's kind of interesting, because it wasn't an American Spirit pack that they flushed down the toilet. Skylar flushed down the toilet, but she's definitely smoking an American Spirit cigarette here. And I always did wonder, whether or not this was the very first time that Skylar smoked, because we don't know. I mean, we don't know if she had been smoking all these times that she had been going out. I know she says in the very next episode that she only smoked 3.5. It's not going to do anything to the baby, but who knows? Who knows if she was being truthful there? Maybe she wasn't telling the full truth. We don't know. And it's always something that I've thought about, if she was sort of going out to, sort of relieve her stress this way and smoke. You would imagine that, for anyone who's ever smoked, if you smoke, it just gets all over your clothes. Cigars too, at Sam Fisher, yeah. Wouldn't recommend it, despite how cool smoking is, as Vince Gilligan himself has said. How he jokingly said on an episode of the Insider Podcast for Better Call Saul, his goal was to make smoking cool again by all the smoking that he put in his own show. And by definition, it does look pretty cool, but pretty bad for you to barbecue your lungs, just for anyone out there who could use that advice. But yeah, it's for anyone who's ever smoked, it just permeates everything. If you smoke a cigarette, even one, it's just going to be all over you. So, you would imagine that when Skylar came home, Walt would have noticed that she smelled like cigarettes. And, of course, he doesn't really say anything till the next episode when she starts smoking. So I would take her at her word that this is she only smoked 3.5, and this is the very first time that she ever smoked. But, of course, again, it's probably a prop master error, if you will, where this is clearly an American Spirit cigarette based on this eagle right here. But the pack she flushed was not American Spirit. But, again, totally nitpicking here. I guess when you watch this episode 2 dozen times, that's kind of where your brain goes. But yeah, it's a great episode here through and through. I loved it. I loved all the various themes that I got to discuss over the course of this episode, and my goodness, I really enjoyed this for sure. Had Sam Fisher, more of a cigar person, only smoked it once, lol. Yeah, I don't really do any of that anymore, but I may have, yeah. I feel like you have to find the right tasting one at Sam Fisher. I definitely feel like it's all about the flavor, and you have to kind of find one that you enjoy. So, yeah, it's Justin Cruz. I agree. In hindsight, she should have went to therapy, but you'd be surprised how hard it is to go to therapy and how expensive it is. And they don't, especially if you don't have a lot of disposable income. And if you're like in an HMO, like Walt and Skylar are, as they said in season 1 of Breaking Bad, your options for sort of mental health are not the greatest. And even like, I really feel like a lot of these sort of insurances didn't even cover mental health as much as they do right now. It wasn't something as prevalent. So having to pay out of pocket for all that is just another sort of expense. And I don't know, maybe she, I feel like it wasn't as readily discussed back then as it is now. It is kind of ironic how sort of very successful, affluent character back in 2004, like 2004, 2005, like Howard Hamlin was using no 2004, yeah 2004 was going to therapy, but it was kind of more of a rich person sort of thing. But yeah, that's a sort of discussion for another video, and I feel like we have to get way into the weeds of of medical insurance, and no one wants to have that discussion. So that's Smokeless Choice, very serendipitous username there for the conversation. But each character was well written in Breaking Bad. No series like it, in my opinion. It stands alone with top writing. Can't argue with that. The way I view this show, I really can't argue with any of that at Smokeless Choice. I would agree with that. As also smoked for 30 years and quits, but too late, lung problems. I'm sorry to hear that, man. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, it really sucks how bad smoking is for you. I do not condone smoking. But and YouTube doesn't want you to either. But it is. I've definitely thought about this. If smoking wasn't horrible for you, I think I would smoke. If it wasn't unbelievably horrible for you in every way, shape, and form. But unfortunately, it is. So yeah, it's unfortunate. But Smokeless Choice, I think that username is very good for sure. So. And yeah, hope your lungs are doing all right. I apologize for well, yeah, I'm sorry you have to go through that. But yeah. But lucky Hank trailer. No, I actually haven't seen. I saw the teaser, but I don't know if they put a trailer out at Justin Cruz. Yeah, it's definitely not good for you at Sam Fisher. But with that, I am gonna have to end it here. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight. Really, thank you so much for everyone who watched. Thank you so much for all of the super chats. I really appreciate all the support. Like I said, I'll try to do these more often. I really apologize for it being so long, but like I said, I'm not really a YouTuber. I really have an entire life that I live outside of YouTube. And yeah, it is kind of crazy to, again, I was sort of thinking back to just how much time I was, again, enjoyably so, because I mean, when there was new stuff to talk about with Better Call Saul, I mean, it was just, videos after videos after videos. But again, it's amazing sort of, it does take a lot of time. Like, it's kind of I remember when I first started to want to make YouTube videos, and like I thought about that. It's like, yeah, I feel like it's something I could do, but again, the sort of editing and everything that goes into it, you really sort of, it's something I wasn't really aware of before I started making YouTube videos. But yes, at Sam Fisher, when will the next one be? Hopefully next week. I really hope I don't go again. I really am going to try to do this one next week as well at Sam Fisher. Not going to try to go for a month. If people want to keep watching them, I'll keep doing them. I really appreciate all the support. At Beth Montgomery, thanks for chat, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. If you're still here, I'd appreciate the thumbs up. It really helps the algorithm, the support, and all of that. And like I said, I will try to do this as soon as possible, this next stream. And really appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight. Have a great rest of your evening. Really enjoyed talking about this show. Really enjoyed the chat. Really loving hearing other people's perspective on this episode and on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul as a series. And I will see you guys around. Take it easy. Have a great rest of your night.